Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to change the water pump and the thermostat along with the upper and lower radiator hoses on my blue GSF. Now, why would you change this? It's not currently leaking, but this car has 150,000 miles on it. It's more preventative maintenance than anything else, but I have seen on the 2UR basically around 100,000 miles when people start getting a slight coolant smell that's not from the valley plate, or it's starting to make some noise. That's generally the issue right here. Now, it is a pretty messy job. You're going to need a couple gallons of coolant, pre-mixed Toyota Long Life, red or pink, whatever your choosing is. Another good idea of things to do while you're in there is the belt tensioner, which is right here. These are not inexpensive. And the belt idler pulley, also not very inexpensive. And at the same time, I'm also going to be installing the RR Racing Pulley kit, which is made by ATI and RR Racing, along with a new belt. For the purposes of breaking this up in whatever you are actually seeking to do, whether water pump and thermostat replacement or tensioner or the pulleys, I'm gonna have 3 separate videos for that. But for this instance, I am just going to cover the water pump, thermostat, upper and lower radiator hoses, and associated parts. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so I will leave a parts list in the video description. If you buy the water pump assembly, it comes with the O-ring, the water pump, the gasket, and the O-ring. There is the upper radiator hose called radiator hose number 1, and the lower radiator hose called radiator hose number 2. The clamps are not necessary to replace. It's just kind of a habit I've always done. And the drain cock. Anytime you disturb that O-ring, it's not a bad idea to replace the O-ring, and the actual plug itself is cheap. There's the thermostat assembly. I'm using Toyota Long Life red coolant that is not pre-diluted, so it has to be diluted 50-50 with distilled water. You can use the pink or the red, pre-diluted or not, however you need to have it. Go ahead and secure your vehicle on jack stands or on a lift. Make sure your vehicle is completely cold. We can go ahead and remove the cap to the expansion tank. So now remove the lower center splash shield. It's several 10mm bolts and a couple pressure clips as well. Not a bad idea to have some spares on hand because some of those clips will break. Now you're going to go ahead and turn the drain cock. Don't need to fully remove it right away. Need to back it out maybe 3 or 4 turns, and then it will start draining coolant. There will be about a gallon and a half of coolant that will come out, so make sure you have appropriate containers. Remove the front cover over the radiator. It's about 10 clips. And let's go ahead and remove the intake elbow as well. 2 little clamps there, and use a Phillips head or a 10 or 12mm screwdriver socket or screwdriver to remove the intake elbow. Remove the belt using a 14mm on the auto tensioner, and use a Allen key or some other stiff metal piece to lock it in place to remove the tension, and then remove the belt. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the upper radiator hose using the 2 clamps and the one that's attached to the coolant overflow. Sometimes those hoses will not want to come off very easily, and so you'll use a box cutter or some kind of razor blade to split it open. Not on the overflow tank unless you're replacing that hose, and I'm not in this instance, but you can see I'm kind of struggling to get that off. So I end up just cutting it so it has a little bit of room to expand, and then the hose will come off. So the new hoses using OEM, they have paint marks on both sides. So there's an alignment pin on both sides so you know exactly the position that it needs to be in so nothing will bind up. Removing the water pump pulley, you can either loosen these bolts before you remove the belt, or like I'm doing here, you just kind of wrap the old belt around it and hold it, and use a power ratchet to remove those 4 12mm bolts. So that will gain you extra access to the bolts around the water pump, so that's why you have to remove the pulley. So I'm going to also remove the 1/2 of the air intake box just to have a little bit more room. You don't have to do it, but it makes life a whole lot easier, and it's not very difficult to remove that box, especially since you've got access to everything right now. So the thermostat housing, you can see that there's 3 10mm nuts on the bottom side that are holding it in, and that's it. But that housing, that aluminum housing, attaches to the water pump, and those 3 bolts have to come off first. You can see here, there's 3 on the left side there. Those 3 have to come off first before you remove the water pump. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And there is a kind of a large washer or O-ring that sits in that. And you have to be careful to make sure when you remove the thermostat housing, the thermostat assembly, that O-ring is also removed. And you'll see when I removed it on this, it actually stuck to the cast aluminum housing. There we go, we're loose. So now we'll get underneath and remove the lower radiator hose. When you reinstall it, it's easier to have the hose already attached to the thermostat housing assembly. It seemed to make life a whole lot easier because everything is already aligned, especially using OEM hoses, so all the paint marks are there, so you know everything is aligned correctly the first time. Perks of using OEM parts, and these hoses aren't overly expensive either compared to like an auto parts store hose. See, the O-ring did not come out. Let's reach up there and grab it. There it is. You will be in a world of hurt if you don't make sure that that is removed. So the replacement, you can see the paint mark lines up with the pin for the new part, and we'll get to that here in a second. So now let's go ahead and remove the water pump. One of the things that I've learned with this water pump removal is when you remove one bolt, put it on the new water pump that you have sitting on your table as you remove them, because they are all different lengths and different sizes too. So there's 2 on the top that are 14mm and the rest of them are 12mm, but all of them are different lengths. So that's why this is important to do it this way. It makes life a whole lot easier. So when you remove the water pump, as I said, you're going to have to remove that cast aluminum housing for the thermostat first, and there is that O-ring right behind it that comes with the water pump assembly. So those 3 have to come off first before you can access a couple of the bolts behind it, and then you can remove the rest of the water pump, the rest of the bolts for the water pump. There we go, we have that loose. The water pump is now loose. You have an O-ring behind the thermostat housing, and you have a gasket, a metal gasket behind the water pump. Really glad that they did not do the sealant for the water pump and they used an actual metal gasket. Could have made life a whole lot more complicated if they had Toyota done that. So as I said, when we were removing the bolts, I put them into the new part to make sure we're all in the correct position. So now you're going to move those parts over to the old water pump so we can put the new pump on, and we'll take those bolts as we install the new pump to make sure we have the right ones. The new O-ring has some little fingers to it, so it makes sure it stays in place. You can see I turned it upside down there and it didn't move. The metal gasket, very hefty gasket, and it will stay in place once you get one bolt started. So the reverse is the same. Make sure you do the bolts around the thermostat housing first before you install the thermostat housing. It's not too difficult to make sure that that O-ring stays in place, but you just need to make sure you don't bind it or pinch it as you're reinstalling this. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Reinstall the pulley, and we'll tighten everything down after we put the belt on. New thermostat and the new lower radiator hose. You can see that the paint mark is lined up and the new O-ring is in there. The old one was orange, the new one is black. Pretty self-explanatory there. Just those 3 10mm nuts. Do not over tighten them because you are tightening onto plastic into cast aluminum. Lower radiator hose, slide it on, put the clamp on, and you are in business. Return the coolant overflow. I don't think I discussed that earlier, but remove it, and I believe it's 2 hoses. I did not record that part, but there's, I believe, 2 little clips, pressure clips, that just kind of hold it in place on the radiator surround. Put the intake assembly and everything back on. Now, this is the important part. This is the coolant bleed, and that is a 6mm hex. What you're going to do is go ahead and fill up everything until the overflow gets full, and then you are going to crack that bleeder valve open until coolant comes out completely solid. You don't want any bubbles, any air, and also, of note, make sure that the nose of the car is slightly higher than the rear. And as I did it on my lift here, I put 2 hockey pucks on the front so it would lift the front of it just a little bit higher. So you want this point, the bleeder valve, you want that to be the highest point on the cooling system, and that's why it's right there. And so you're gonna go ahead and once you have a solid stream coming out of there, you're gonna go ahead and start it up. Well, close the bleed valve, start it up, and make sure everything starts circulating. Run it until it gets up where the fans turn on and the thermostat opens. You can put your hand on the lower hose, make sure you feel that it's warm, and you know you're in business. And if you don't make sure you run the heater on full blast after that, and just make sure you have no air in the system. If you're not getting hot air, or if your car is overheating, then you have air in the system and you need to repeat that process. Lots of videos on how to bleed a cooling system if you've never done it before. This one can be tricky, but the key I've found is having the nose just slightly in the air so it makes that bleed valve, that bleed screw, the highest point on the car. And you want completely solid flow coming out of it. It will make a mess. That's why you don't want to put the lower cover back on yet. And you're in business.